like to start off the show tonight by asking a question. If the eyes are the windows of the soul, is the voice perhaps the sound of the soul? Tonight on Choices, we're going to explore the power of voice, how it can heal and how it can liberate the inner self. My name is Cameron Moffat. I'd like to welcome you to Choices. Tonight on the show, Bija Belina is going to be taking us through the world of voice, the power of voice. Now, Bija is a RMT, registered massage therapist, and a vocal artist from the last 40 years, I believe. 40 years in Victoria. She's also the founder and director of Sound Body Works, and she will explain to us in a moment what exactly that is. So let's go forward now and explore the power of voice. Bija, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
So before we get started, I'd like to relate to the audience my experience. Bija invited myself and our executive producer to one of her workshops about 2 weeks ago, and Raji and I went with no idea what we were walking into, and what we both found was quite amazing. Back in grade 4, when I was growing up, I was asked at the Christmas gala practice to please not sing the Christmas songs. I guess I had a voice that was starting to change and wasn't exactly desirable. And ever since then, I've had this, I didn't realize at the time, but I've had this mild phobia about singing in public. During your workshop that evening, when I realized you were about to ask me to sing, I could feel my throat tighten right up. And it was physiologically palpable, folks. I could feel discomfort in my throat and even down into my heart chakra. And at that point, I thought, oh my goodness. And as you encouraged me to continue singing, I felt quite a strong release in that. And after the show, as Raji and I were driving home, we could not believe how light we felt and how childlike we felt. And it was a wonderful feeling. So let's begin now. What exactly is Sound Body Works?
Sound Body Studio was born about 18 years ago, and at that time it was called VoiceWorks. And the reason why it was called VoiceWorks is that using your voice works. It works in the most exquisite way to release frustration, tension, rage, all the things that we're asked in our world and in our lives to contain. To use your voice de-stresses, decompresses, allows you to expand again. Stress, to me, is like a fist. And I might start off in my stress with just a light fist, a light punch in here. But as the day goes on, it just keeps getting tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. So when am I going to release that fist? When am I going to expand? Some of us, people who work, let's say, on computers all day, their bodies are like this. So by the time they come home, I had a patient on my table once, and she was a computer savant, and she laid down, her eyes closed, and her hands were like this. I asked her, could you open your eyes and tell me where your arms are? And she went, oh my God.
Goodness, yes.
They're still up here. I said, yeah. So stress becomes a habitual pattern. So in the day job, which you never quit your day job,
True.
It's all about allowing people to understand how their stress manages them, controls them, how their stress dictates what they can and cannot do. Jaw tension, perfect example. How many of us are tooth grinders, jaw setters? How many of us do this all the time because we're focusing on a screen? That's tremendous tension through here. But if I'm going to do this here, it's going to affect me muscle-wise, physiologically, here.
Of course.
So that's just the practicality of massaging someone. Showing them ways that this is where they begin and this is where they end, at skin level. If I touch you a little deeper, I'm hitting fascia. If I touch deeper, then I'm hitting muscle. And I'm also hitting bone. On some level, what a massage therapist does for a person is allows them to get a sense of their imprint. This is what I feel like. Because otherwise, most of the time, we're aware of this part of ourselves, the thinking self that moves forward to task. You become aware of your physical body when you're in pain. So tennis elbow, you carried too many grocery bags, you had an injury, you're limping, and then you're like sore, you wake up in the morning and you've got a kink in your neck. That's your physical self. But if I expand to the emotional stress, let's say something is happening all the way in Montreal related to my family. My mother is dying, or any variety of things that are stressful to us emotionally, that touch us. I could be here in Victoria, but I'm completely, 3/4 of me is in Montreal.
Sure, of course.
So if I get the phone call from my sister, like, this is what's going down, you got to show up. Okay, what do you think my body's going to do? It's going to like, boom, I'm getting the airplane, I'm going to be there, blah, blah, blah. So emotional stress begets physical stress, can beget spiritual stress, and on and on and on.
So then in your studio, how do you address that?
By not addressing it in this, like a conversation like this,
Okay.
but by giving people the opportunity to hook into rhythm and time, to explore what are musical skills, like what's harmony, what's rhythm, what's time, am I in time, am I not in time? That becomes more interesting to them, that wait a minute, I didn't come in on a one, I came in between.
Can that also be challenging to somebody? Could that cause stress? I know when you came close, you were asking me, getting ready to ask me to start singing, I felt my stress spike up.
Yeah.
So how do you help the person through that?
By making sound.
Okay.
If we're in circle formation and there's someone new, and there's always someone new in VoiceWorks in the class.
I was
always,
the new guy
always,
that,
always.
yeah.
There's always someone new. So what I say to them is, when it's your turn, I don't want you to stop singing. I don't want you to lock up. What I want you to do is, if the rhythm of the piece is ba, da, 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 and we're all singing something terrific about, the chicken that crossed the road. It doesn't matter what we're singing about, truly.
Right.
And it's your turn. What I want you to do is, I don't want to do this actually at all.
Right.
So you have to do it in time. Because what I'm trying to train you and give my students an opportunity for is to not just think about themselves. When you're composing a piece of music with a group of people, it's the group that's important. It's what you're adding to the group that's important. So if you're going to go, da, 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 I don't want to do this, no way, no how, pass. The piece still goes.
And you're still adding something.
You're still adding something. So your sense of fear, and if you think about the things that stop us, fear, depression, are going to keep us immobilized. They make us small.
Right.
So VoiceWorks and Sound Body Studio offers the opportunity to become big.
Well, I noticed on the workshop that I attended with you, you did point out to one of the other participants that at least they said something and they were still part of the circle. And that person lit right up when they had that realization.
Yeah.
They didn't have to go into a place where they were uncomfortable, but they added to it, and that meant something to them. And I remember you pointing that out.
It means a tremendous amount.
Okay. Okay.
Because we all have a history where we were told to silence our voices
Sure, absolutely, we have been.
in one form or another, whether it was in school or by friends or family. So this is very different than choir singing. I can go to a choir, which when I was trying to figure out what am I craving for my own well-being.
This is going back to when you started developing these concepts.
Yeah, when I started to develop these concepts, I went to every single choir in town, and I came back going, this was wonderful to be in a choir with 200 people, and you all know the words. There's a power, there's a surge, there's a charge, but it didn't come down to here. So what happened several years within that period, in the beginnings, is I was in a vocal improv group called the Flying Mermaids.
Okay.
And we were completely off the wall. It was lovely. It was truly lovely.
Name, I guess.
Fantastic. So when our group disbanded, because life takes people in different directions, I realized, Bisha, this is so important to your physical and mental health. This is where joy bubbles up.
Right.
This is where courage is born. This is where boldness speaks in melody.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I did that, I actually released a CD. I spent 2 years in a recording studio. I discovered all these multiples of myself where I harmonized to myself. I did counter time. I discovered not only the beauty of music, but my joyfulness kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So my sense of permission to create whatever I wanted out of whatever came to me, whether it was I lost a glove. I'm going to sing a song about losing my favorite glove, and something will happen.
So I'm gathering then you took this far beyond just in the studio creating music when you said I created what I wanted. How did it change your personal life?
Oh my God, completely.
Now we're going to be stopping for a break in just a moment, but let's talk about that just for a second. How did it actually change your personal life? What were the benefits you saw?
Permission. Joyfulness just went boom.
Permission to do what?
To do whatever you want to do.
Okay.
If you are allowed and you give yourself permission to speak, to sing, which is, voice is your most intimate self.
It is, yes.
All of a sudden you go, wait a minute, if I'm okay in this field, I can do this.
Okay.
I can do this. Plus, my husband and children start to cook more because I was.
There you go, folks.
I was busy.
So that was one way your personal life changed. What else did you see changing then?
I realized that what I had created was of incredible value to caregivers. And because I've been a caregiver for just about 30 years, and in the early beginnings of being a caregiver, registered massage therapist, I was dealing with depression, not just my own depression, but the depression of those that I worked with.
Okay.
And there's what I would call the cloak of sorrow.
Sure.
That is not necessarily my sorrow, but I'm under their umbrella, so to speak.
Sure.
So a lot of my friends are nurses, social workers, teachers. So I developed a program called Compassion Burnout, VoiceWorks for Compassion Burnout.
Perfect. Let's take a break, and when we come back, let's find out how you've applied that then to the community of caregivers. We're going to take a break for a moment, folks, and we'll be right back with Bisha and the power of voice. Welcome back. We've been listening to and exploring with Bisha the power of the voice, and we'd like to continue, Bisha and I, with how your sound body studio can help caregivers. And so let's define caregivers. Who would you find would be needing your work?
Who comes are nurses,
Nurses.
social workers,
Okay.
teachers, people who, there's a lot of output. There's a lot of holding others so that they can then resolve what they need to resolve. So counselors are incredible witnesses. So anyone who is quote unquote a witness, anyone who has, there's a particular code of ethics that when you're working with someone who's in stress, trauma, you can't say anything about it. So in terms, which is, thank you very much, this is really helpful. I need to know that no one's going to talk about what's going on in my life. But I also, as a caregiver, how am I going to download that?
Right.
I need to download it somehow.
Appropriately. You don't want to go home.
Appropriately,
Yes,
right.
You don't want to go home and download it inappropriately.
Right, because those things happen. If I remember a story with a friend of mine who had a very difficult situation in the hospital years and years ago. And she came home and it was 2 o'clock at night and her daughter was crying and things just got completely out of hand because my friend was exhausted. She had, the issue that she had dealt with was ethically huge, and she had to sort that out. But here her child was going through a crisis, so from one crisis to another. Mm-hmm. My suggestion when I work with hospice nurses or anybody really,
Anybody, yeah.
is if it's raining, you're coming home. You've had a really rough day. You turn the windshield wipers on.
There's your rhythm. Of course.
There's your rhythm, and you start singing. Oh, maybe I had the worst day, and how am I going to make it until I get home?
Right.
So you start singing the blues, and you start wailing away at your blues.
You know, I'm getting a whole different perspective on the person you see when you're sitting in your car and you look over and the person's in their car and they're singing away. You think, crazy person. But maybe they're not so crazy. Maybe they're actually handling their stress very well. I'm going to start singing in my car.
It's so brilliant. And even people from choir, they would say, when I'm practicing a piece of music, I'm practicing on the way from home to choir practice.
Right.
You're singing. So what does singing do? It makes you breathe more. So if I'm going to do, I can do meditation where I'm the stress in my world, I'm going, shh. I want to diffuse it, decompress it by stilling myself.
Sure.
That's very valuable. But there's certain times in my life I don't want to.
Just kind of settle it down.
I don't want to settle it down.
You want to throw it out.
There's a charge. So what do you do with charge? Appropriately, right? So playing with appropriate charge, discharge, music, the language of music, the principles of music help you a tremendous amount.
Sure.
So when I've worked with Indigenous people, there was a group that I was working with, a family, and we would do some serious howling. Because in the beginning, one of the concepts in somebody is you start off whining and yenching. You have complete permission to just
Yeah, nobody's born laughing.
Nobody's going to do anything. No one's going to interrupt. You're just like singing the blues if that's where you want to go in a musical style. But in order not to dig a hole and live in the blues, the homework then as a composer, because I ask each student to be a composer in their piece of music that we all create together. So verse 1, verse 2, you're allowed to yench, moan, drivel, groan. You're totally allowed. By the first chorus, you got to pick it up and you got to start asking the question, so how am I going to get out of this? Right. So how am I going to? Come on, you tell me, how am I going to? So all of a sudden I've changed a style of music. I could go into rap if I wanted to, or hip hop, and then I could go back to the blues. It becomes musically interesting. Mm-hmm. Then the third, fourth verses are like, well, maybe it's not so bad, or really, maybe it's just not so bad. And then you start finding other ways of dealing with what has been so low down for you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you've taken them through a whole rainbow of possibility. Right. You've acknowledged, yes, I feel like low down bad, but there's a way to move forward. One of the shows that I was involved with last year was called From the Heart. Did you see that show? It was at the Uptown Mall.
Okay.
And it was a community theater.
Mm-hmm.
It was in a humongous labyrinth where the audience of 8, groups of 8 would walk through, and it was all about, at first it was 30 actors, and eventually it became 130 actors that volunteered. Mm-hmm. And we were examining the role of being a settler in Canada and what that did, mm-hmm. what that does, the weight it carried, the guilt it carried, the shame it carried, the tragedy, the trauma, the how a people get destroyed. Mm-hmm. And yet some of the people that came were running away from destruction as well. So it's like, oh my God, okay, this is difficult information.
Sure, those are the founding people of Canada.
Founding people of Canada, exactly. So where's honor, respect, and how do you handle and cope with the emotional weight of asking yourself those kinds of questions? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I was hired by Will Wiegler, who was the director for this show, and my job was to teach the volunteer actors to become an ensemble. So how do I get a shy person who's very profound and incredibly interested in what is going on, and they want to discover it, explore it, spelunk around it, and find tough questions to answer.
Right, right.
That's all this, that's compression, right? That's a small, you're small. So here I have to take 30 people and teach them, yes, I honor all this, the profound questions you have, but I got to get you to be big because you're going to be an actor.
Right.
You are going to be, you have to be loud, you have to be expansive, you have to be so comfortable in your own research and in yourself that when an audience comes through, you have to engage with them.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was the process.
That was the process.
That we did over a 6-month period. But VoiceWorks and Sound Body became unbelievably critical during rehearsals and during performances.
So those are the two components that you offer, the two different sort of vehicles you use in your therapy.
The physical
Yeah.
is key. Then the vocal
Then the vocal.
is key. And the third is movement.
Movement.
Why? Because when you are fearful, when you feel small, when you feel unheard, you don't move.
Right. And I noticed in the workshop I did with you that was a big thing that you've got us all doing, is moving and sort of lightening up the body a bit. So I just want to diverge just for a moment. Where do you see this going? And I'm going to answer my own question. I see this going into things like hospitals. I see this going into places where nurses might have access for 15 minutes before a shift, or bringing this into, say, nursing colleges, universities. Where do you see it going?
Well, the exciting part is over the last 5 years, my determination has been that Sound Body Studio and VoiceWorks cannot just be Bisha. It needs to be transferable.
Okay.
So Margot Johnson is our first teacher, and there's 2 other women doing teacher training. And within the process of teacher training, my question to them is, what is the community, the group that you are connected to, that you see this work being of value?
And what have they offered?
Margot just did a volunteer evening with people suffering from Parkinson's.
Okay.
I presented at Camosun College for visual arts students, 23, 24-year-olds, who, what was fascinating about that relationship with them is I had an hour and a half, and the title of my presentation was Bones, Space, and Time. So the first component was, as a visual artist, where are you sore? Their wrists, their hands, because when they draw, they're like this, and they're really focused, and they're barely breathing, right? So we did 20 minutes of self-massage to de-stress, and then we started to do things like, okay, let's get bigger. So then I got the kids to do different movement patterns, sequences. So we talked about space. And in this room, you and I are sitting in a middle space, but there's the bottom space and there's the top space. So 20 of them had to go through the room and give me the variety of space that you can claim.
Oh, interesting.
6 of them had to take photos because that was going to be art project for them later.
Okay.
And I wanted them to experience themselves grow physically, claim space, but then I wanted them to understand that their physical body needed space.
Right.
Their mind needed space.
So you really helped them work through all aspects of their physical and emotional sense. And that's an amazing gift to be able to give them, Bisha. That is.
And they were so joyful. They were like, oh my God, we rocked out. Yes, you did.
Really, this can go in many different directions, can't it? I really wish you well with this, and I really hope that after today's show, many of the people watching the show have a sense of where they can go. So at the end of the show, folks, we'll have Bisha's contact information up on the screen. You have classes going during the week at nights people can tap into. And you also hold workshops, I believe?
I hold a variety of workshops. The latest that we've developed is vocal anatomy, which is anatomy of the singer. So there's that, and there's also anatomy. How do you, regular peeps, you and me, sitters, chronic sitters, it's whatever your body posture suffers from,
Right.
I teach you how to access the flesh and bones of your instrument.
So the practical aspects too.
Yep.
Bisha, thank you very much for coming on the show. This has been fascinating.
Thank you.
And my voice is much freer since I came to you. A little bit freer. I mean, I have a bit more work to do, but very intriguing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, folks, for watching Choices. On behalf of the crew here at Choices, we thank you for tapping into us, and we hope that we've offered tonight for you offers you some choices in your healthcare. Next episode, we'll be dealing with, we'll be interviewing a yoga therapist who uses yoga and movement dealing with depression. Thanks very much and have a good night.